everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Snappy Cappy. Today I'm by myself. I took the day off of work. Well, the past 2 days, actually. I have had a migraine for like the past 24 hours. And obviously, I'm a little hoarse. I think I have some like crazy allergies going on or something. So it's just like I'm gonna take the day to rest and also do a little podcast because why not? So today's episode is about self-publishing a book because if you guys didn't know, I self-published my own book at the beginning of this year. It's called To Be Ordinary. It is a poetry book, and this poetry book takes inspiration from a lot of different things. It primarily takes inspiration from my life, of course, because when you're a writer, you write about your life. Another thing that this book takes a lot of inspiration from is different video games that I really love and enjoy, games that have really spoken to me throughout my life and that I can relate to. It's not very obvious if you've ever read it, but if you can guess some of the games that some of the poems are inspired by, please let me know in the comments if you've already read it. And if you haven't read it already, there will be a link in the description to buy it. It is available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle as well as a paperback version for people who are like me and prefer physical books. I actually started writing poetry when I was in 11th grade. Shout out to my English teacher at the time, Mr. Marquez, who just do a chapbook as one of our finals in 11th grade. It was a huge inspiration to me because I've always loved writing. I have been writing ever since I could really put pen to paper. I would always make up crazy little stories in my head or take inspiration from media that I really enjoyed. Like, I'm pretty sure I wrote like a billion Spider-Man and Linkin Park fan fictions when I was younger. We do not talk about the Linkin Park fan fictions, though. Shout out to the website LP Fiction. You'll never find me because my username was probably something really ridiculous. I probably couldn't find myself if I tried. But yeah, I just took inspiration from everywhere, but that chapbook was really like the number one thing that got me interested in writing poetry, especially because we had to write our own poetry and write it in the style of 16th, 17th, and 18th century poetry writers. Into it, I'm start off talking about why you should self-publish. Self-publishing does include a lot more work for you because, of course, you're not going to have an editor, you're not going to have a marketing team behind you, you're not going to have somebody funding your book. But the great thing about self-publishing is the fact that you have more creative control, and that's something that I feel like people don't take into consideration when they're first starting to write, is the amount of creative control that you have when you don't have a publisher or a sponsor behind you trying to tell you what they want to see from you. Especially when it comes to my writing, like I feel like my writing style is very chaotic and very dark and very deep. And something that I've noticed from a lot of modern day poets is that it's very basic, for lack of a better term. It's very basic and it's very like teen bopper to where it has substance, and I think that's just like a style that's being pushed around a lot nowadays from publishers, and maybe it isn't, maybe it is out. Yeah, that really sucks. Another great thing about self-publishing is that you obviously make more money. If you are planning to sell your book, which I think is the intention of most writers. When you self-publish, a lot more of that money goes into your pocket. Even if you are putting it on a platform like Lulu Press or Amazon, a lot of that money is going to go towards you because they take a small percentage, but the other percentage goes to you. Whereas if you're going to do that and go through a publisher, there's a percentage that goes to the publisher, a percentage that goes to the platform, and then the percentage that goes to you. Next is the timeline. When you go to the publisher, you have a short timeline. And if you are also someone like me that likes to take the time to really rework everything that you've written and reflect on what you've written and what you can do to improve your writing, you don't get a lot of that when you are under a publisher. They kind of give you, we want to see the first chapter written in like 3 days. I don't think that's realistic timing for a publisher either, but just as an example, I want you to write this chapter in 3 days, and then I want you to write the second and third chapter in like 2.5 weeks. That doesn't bode well with me. Like, I need to take the time to really reflect and research and delve deep into myself and see what there is that I want to share with people, and maybe if there is something that I want to share with people but I don't want to share it directly, what kind of analogies can I use in order to portray this feeling that I'm feeling but without saying it directly. Now, a big thing about writing is very obviously the writing process. So as I mentioned earlier, I kind of started working on this poetry book when I was in 11th grade. So I was 17, like 16, 17 at the time. The first couple of poems in my book are actually poems that I wrote for my chapbook. For example, the one that I can think of right off the top of my head is The Wasteland. If you were my age around that time, that is, I think, a year after Mad Max Fury Road was released, and myself and my friend group was obsessed with this movie, like insanely obsessed. Like, you know the way that people are obsessed with Twilight? Yeah, this was the way we were obsessed with Fury Road. And that poem was based off of Mad Max Fury Road, and it was also written in the style of one of the 16th century poems that we were analyzing. I can't remember exactly which poem. It followed the rhyme scheme and the meter of it, I believe. I can't remember 100%, but yeah, because of that chapbook, I was inspired to write a lot more poetry. And I kind of briefly followed I want to say the context, but I followed the feeling that I portrayed in that poetry project on some of the other poems that I wrote, and it was kind of like a dark and eerie style of writing, because of course when you think of Mad Max and you think of The Wasteland, like, you think of death, destruction, poverty, things of that nature. angsty teenager, like that's kind of like what you think everyday life feels like when it's not, but it's kind of what you think of life at that point. Like, oh my god, it's so horrible. High school is so horrible. Everything sucks. Everyone hates me. Ugh, what is me? So that was kind of like the feeling that I put into my poems at that time. As I grew older, I started talking about, more complex things such as like, growing up, what it's like to have to grow up when you feel like you had already grown up a long time ago. Family problems, like what you think death is like, and all of these things, like all of these richy subjects, I guess I would say. And structuring this book was kind of an afterthought. I kind of just kept writing poems without a topic or without a structure to it, without themes involved, because I feel like when you're writing, you shouldn't have to think about all of these things and how it's going to end up looking together. I feel like you should just write to write and write what you feel at the moment and write what you feel is good for you, like what you have to express in that moment, because it doesn't make sense to write about what you think is going to sound good put together. And that was kind of my thought process. Like, I'm not going to think about the end result because it doesn't have to be fluid. It doesn't have to be about one specific thing or one specific theme. I know most poetry books nowadays are themed, like they'll have one section about love and one section about loss and one section about self-discovery and all of these things, but that's not what the point of my book was going to be. The point of my book is kind of like, again, what does it feel like to be ordinary? What does it feel like to be one of everyone else? Because in reality, we are all one person. We're all related. Not one person is better than another. So that was kind of. And actually, this book had gone through more than one publishing process. The original title for this book was going to be Thoughts Which Manifest at Night, and I think there are still a couple books floating with that title on it, but I felt like I could explore a little bit more and write a little bit more to where it felt like a complete book, because I think originally there were only 30 poems that I had worked on, and it just didn't feel complete to me, didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel. And that's how it evolved into To Be Ordinary. It started out as kind of like an otherworldly theme, but then I was like, well, everybody has these thoughts and feelings. Everybody has these sort of dreams and aspirations that they want to push forward. So why is it going to be more of a dream state than it is, how we actually feel about certain things? So I can't really talk a lot about the writing process, because my writing process was just like everywhere. I never officially sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write a poem about this, or I'm going to write a poem about that. I'm going to write a poem about death. I'm going to write a poem about grief. I'm going to write a poem about losing your first love or whatever. That wasn't me. I wrote poems basically wherever I had the chance to sit down and write. Like, I'm in the middle of classes and I would have an idea pop up into my head, and I was like, oh my god, I have to write about this immediately. Like, if I don't write this down, the thought is going to be gone forever, and then I'm going to be mad at myself. Or I'd be in the middle of doing homework, and I'd be like, oh, I really like this idea, I'm going to write about that. And then later on, I would go and I would edit it and make it to be what it is currently. There's a huge importance when it comes to editing and revisions. And this is going to be across the board, not just with poetry, but with nonfiction and fiction. But I feel like the editing process for poetry is a lot more difficult because if you change the wording at all in any type of poem, it can completely throw the poem off, whether it be its rhyme or the tempo of it. And little edit is going to affect the sound and the way that people are going to read it and perceive it. So editing poetry, you have to be very analytical and you have to be very specific to how you hear it in your head, because the way that you even just put punctuation is going to change the way that it sounds, and is going to change the effect that the poem has on someone when they're reading it aloud or if they're reading it in their heads. It's a very complicated, very interesting process. So I took a lot of time to look over each poem and edit them and revise them in a way that was going to sound good to me, because I think that's also one of the most important things too. Like, everything has to sound good to you. It doesn't necessarily matter what everyone else is going to think when you're reading it, because poetry is so specific that everyone's going to have a different idea of what the poem means if you wrote it well. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at writing or that my poetry is a lot better than anybody else's, because of course that's up to interpretation. But as long as it sounds good to you and it makes sense to you in your head, I think it's going to give your audience a better chance of understanding what you meant. And if it means something entirely different to them, that's cool too. Like, that is something that my instructors drilled deep into my head, is that every single person is going to interpret a poem completely differently from, and also the author. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about it as well. But when you are writing your own poetry and you are revising it and doing all that good stuff, just know that it's going to sound differently to everyone. And to know what you want out of it and what you intend to display, I suppose. So choosing a self-publishing platform. I started out with Lulu Press. I decided to go with Lulu Press because it was very straightforward and very easy to maneuver. I decided to move away from Lulu Press for the final publishing just because I had quite a few people order my book there towards the end, and a lot of people didn't receive them. And I'm not too sure why, because it used to be really good, but eventually, like, their shipping got so long. Like, you would order it and it would say that it was going to be received 2 weeks later, and 2 weeks would come in, never show up. And not only that, but it took a lot of the royalties from the book. I think at the end they're taking like 60% of the royalties. So you get like $10, you had to list your book at like $30, which is really not good. And I don't want to do that to people because it is a short book. It is a poetry book. It's only about 80 pages. It's like, why am I going to charge people so much for a book and also get almost no return? Like, that is insanely ridiculous. Even if I didn't really want to go with Amazon, I think Amazon, Kindle Direct, and all of that was a lot better because the royalties for the writer are much better and you can list your book at a cheaper price. And the great thing about it is with that, people who have a Kindle can get the book for free. And on top of that, you get a physical copy as well if that's something that you would prefer. And I like being able to have those two options because I know nowadays a lot of people prefer to have a digital book over than, pounds and pounds of physical books that people can't fit in their homes. Also, finding a self-publishing platform is very difficult because I know a lot of them can be super scammy. Again, like I said, I really liked Lulu Press at the beginning, but after a while, it just started to become very sketchy. And not only that, but I would get blown up by them with emails so often that it was like I would get 20 to 30 emails a day about like marketing stuff that I did not care about. So that was not very fun, not very good, 0 out of 10. And also the like publishing guidelines was really strange too, but I feel like it's because it's primarily like a young adult publishing website or like adult and kids publishing. Like it was just odd, and then it would always screw up with my formatting too, and that was just really frustrating. Formatting on Amazon isn't perfect. Like trying to format it for Kindles was ridiculous, and then I know there's a couple pages on the print one that like printed kind of odd, but it was like I'm done trying to shoot for perfection. Like I'm just gonna go with. So that was not very fun, not very good, 0 out of 10. And also the like publishing guidelines was really strange too, but I feel like it's because it's primarily like a young adult publishing website or like adult and kids publishing. Like it was just odd, and then it would always screw up with my formatting too, and that was just really frustrating. Formatting on Amazon isn't perfect. Like trying to format it for Kindles was ridiculous, and then I know there's a couple pages on the print one that like printed kind of odd, but it was like I'm done trying to shoot for perfection. Like I'm just gonna go with how it looks, and if people have a problem with it, and whatever. So I'm one of those people who definitely judges books by their covers. I'm sorry, not sorry. So creating a good cover was very difficult for me because I wanted something that matched my personality but also matched the content of my book. And if you know me, you know I love, pinks, purples, like medieval themes, Japanese themes, things like that. But I feel like the things that I really enjoyed didn't match the content of the book. So trying to build a cover that was going to reflect like both parts, like myself as well as the content, was just wild. I messed with a lot of different designs for like a couple of weeks, and I finally settled on the current book cover. I really like the current book cover because I can use these colorful, fun themes and also use that as a reflection of the content of the book. If you've never seen the cover before, it is like a lavender purple cover, and it has like these twiddly designs on the upper left hand corner and the bottom right hand corner. It has in like kind of old English-y text. It's not necessarily old English, but it looks old English-y. Has the title of the book and my name, and then it has an upside down sword in the middle, like a medieval sword. I really liked that design because it's very simple, but it's also very effective. I chose the sword because it's, you know, a very hard-hitting book. Sometimes it makes you feel like you got stabbed on your gut. So that's kind of why I decided to choose a sword. And of course, again, I chose the color scheme because those are colors that I love and colors that I enjoy. And I wanted to make the end of the book very lighthearted as well. So that's kind of why I went for a softer color scheme, because it does end on a good note, a cautionary but a good note. Back to formatting. Formatting is the worst part of writing a book, especially if you don't have someone who can format it for you. I spent more time formatting this book than I did anything else. I am not kidding. It's just very frustrating because each website has a different way for you to format a book, depending on what type of book it is, what size you want it, whether it's going to be hard or soft or digital. However, formatting is different for each and every type of book. Sometimes a website will claim one size, like an 8x10 or a 9x12, whatever have you, and then it has to be in PDF format, but then when you actually go to the website and you try uploading it, it's completely different. And it denies you, and then you have to try and figure out what's wrong with it, and then sometimes pages are not in the right place, and titles of one poem are on top of another poem, and it's just insane. So if you ever do decide to publish your own book, just know that the formatting part is going to be the hardest. And if there's somebody that you know who's like an expert in formatting, hire them to do that part for you, because I do not want to do formatting ever again. It is so frustrating. The hard part of publishing a book on your own is the marketing and promotion. I know I had a lisp when I said that, but I didn't. Marketing without a traditional publisher is definitely very difficult because you don't have the money and you don't have the manpower to put out a dozen advertisements a day and to do email lists and to already have an established base of people that you can promote to. That is one. Sorry, my microphone died and I don't know when it died. But one of the biggest challenges for me was actually just publishing it, just putting it out there. I have a really big problem with perfectionism, and it took so long for me to do this because of that perfectionist attitude. I hate that I have that perfectionist attitude, and I really hate the fact that it prevents me from actually completing tasks. Okay, sorry people, my microphone died and I don't know when it died or why it died, but I'm going to make this quick because I don't want my other microphone to die. But anyways, the best type of marketing is word of mouth marketing. So if you can go to like different events and sell your book and talk about your book to people in person, that is beautiful. That is fantastic. I highly suggest doing that. Social media is definitely hard if you don't have a bunch of followers already. So if you're someone like me that doesn't have a billion followers and doesn't know anybody who can promote your book that has a billion followers, that is going to be difficult. So, going to different cultural events, going to different like art markets, and having books that you can sell, that is beautiful. That's amazing. 10 out of 10. That is the best type of marketing, especially if you are in like small artsy communities, or even if you are in like a big city. I think that is like really great. So that is definitely a challenge. Another of the big challenges that I have is perfectionism. If you are somebody who's a perfectionist like me, it is very difficult for us to complete tasks or complete even passion projects because we always think that it's not going to be perfect. And that is the problem. It isn't ever going to be perfect. Nothing that you do is going to be perfect. So getting past that mindset is going to help you finish a project and help you see the fruits of your labor. That is such a huge thing, and it's also such a powerful thing, because when you can get past your perfectionist mindset and see the fruits of your labor and see that a bunch of people love it or a bunch of people don't love it, then you can see how you can grow and also see what you are doing right, so that other people later on who wants to see more projects from you can see more projects from you. That is what we need. We need more projects from amazing people, and most of them have perfectionism problems. And I did. So that is about it for today. If you guys have any questions about self-publishing that are things that I didn't go over here, feel free to leave it in the comments. I will love to answer your questions. If you have any experiences yourself with self-publishing, let us know in the comments below also. And lastly, if you guys want a deeper dive into any specific topic in a future episode, that would be awesome. Please let us know. And thank you once again for listening / watching. We will see you again very soon.